You know, the Super Bowl halftime show is supposed to be this huge unifying moment, right? But what if it was actually designed to do the exact opposite? Today, we're unpacking a pretty pointed critique that says the show wasn't just entertainment, it was a hostile takeover. Let's dive in.
So in this explainer, we're going to break down a really provocative argument that the NFL's Super Bowl halftime show wasn't just some big concert. Nope, the claim is that it was a deliberate cultural statement specifically designed to alienate a huge part of its traditional audience. We're going to walk through the claims, the evidence they use, and the central analogy that ties it all together.
All right, so where does this argument even begin? Well, according to the source, it starts with the performer himself. It really questions the choice of Bad Bunny for what it calls, the most prestigious stage of the year. The question they're asking is pretty simple. Did this artist truly represent the massive, diverse American audience that was tuning in?
And here's a key piece of their evidence. The argument is that, look, despite being a global superstar, this artist just doesn't reflect mainstream American tastes. And they point to this number right here as proof, a peak U.S. chart position of 85. They're basically saying, is that really the sign of a unifying cultural force?
Okay, so it's not just about who was on stage, it's about what happened on stage. The argument then zeroes in on the performance itself. And a huge point for the source is the exclusive use of Spanish. Now, they frame this not as, a celebration of diversity, but as a very deliberate choice to basically lock out the non-Spanish speaking portion of that huge American audience.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. The source goes hard on the lyrics. It claims that if you actually understood Spanish, the words weren't just a little edgy, they were super explicit. The whole argument is that this kind of content was just completely out of place for what's supposed to be a family event, right? And it just made that disconnect even bigger for a lot of viewers.
But here's the thing. This argument isn't just about tearing down the official show. The source actually presents a competing event, positioning it as a direct cultural answer to the Super Bowl's performance.
So the whole case is really built around this stark contrast. On one side, you've got the official show, which the source slams for its exclusionary language and what it calls a Babylon, a decadent culture. And on the other side, an alternative event from the conservative group TPUSA, featuring Kid Rock, and it's presented as a story of redemption, all about Christian values. And this alternative show, it's laid out as this really thought-out redemption story. It literally starts with a pretty vulgar, secular song and then takes you on this journey all the way to an explicitly Christian message. The source claims this whole narrative arc was built for the exact audience that felt left out by the official halftime show. And of course, they bring out the numbers to back this up. The source presents these viewership figures to argue that, hey, this alternative show wasn't some tiny fringe event. They claim it was a massive cultural moment on its own, even dwarfing the official show's YouTube replays right after it aired.
Yeah, get this, over 25 million views. The source really leans into this number. They even compare it to the ratings of huge cultural hits like American Idol back in its heyday, arguing that this kind of engagement proves a massive audience was out there actively looking for something else.
So, you see, the crucial point here isn't just about this performance versus that performance. It's about the feeling these events supposedly created. And to really drive this home, the source uses this powerful analogy to explain the relationship between the NFL and its audience. Okay, so the analogy goes like this. Imagine you're invited to a huge party. It's an annual thing, and you've been going for years. You're a loyal guest, you bring your friends, you've always supported the host. You've basically helped make this party the event of the year. But then, this year, something's off. The host's whole vibe has changed. Instead of being welcoming, they're kind of lecturing you. They start openly making fun of the values that you and your friends care about. Suddenly, the whole atmosphere just feels, hostile.
And then comes the big moment, the main event, the centerpiece of the whole night that everyone's been waiting for, and it's delivered in a language you can't understand. No translation, no help, nothing. You are totally shut out. You're just left there feeling confused and unwelcome in a place that used to feel like your own.
And that leaves you asking yourself this really gut-wrenching question. You start wondering about the host's real motives. Like, why did he even invite me? Was I just brought here to be mocked and humiliated? The source argues that this is exactly how millions of Super Bowl viewers felt. And that right there brings us to the source's main point. The argument is that the NFL, as the host of this party, completely failed in its most basic duty. Its job isn't to lecture or to instruct, but to hold the room.
to create a space where everyone can feel welcome. By showing what the source calls content, the argument goes, the NFL just shattered that trust.
Okay, so we've had the critique of the show, the comparison to the alternative, and that whole hostile host analogy. So what's the bottom line here? According to the source, what was the real message being sent during that halftime show?
The argument concludes that this wasn't some accident. It wasn't a simple miscalculation. No, the claim is that it was a deliberate declaration, a kind of hostile takeover, signaling that a new culture is in charge now, and that the traditional audience is basically old news, totally irrelevant.
So that begs the question, right? Why on earth would a huge organization risk alienating its own core audience like that? Well, the source offers this pretty bleak explanation. It's because they think the audience is so hooked on the product, in this case football, that they'll put up with anything. Like a drug addict who will just keep coming back for more, no matter how badly they're treated.
And that leaves us with the final, really provocative question that the source poses. What is the real relationship between a massive cultural institution like the NFL and its audience? Is it one of hospitality and mutual respect, or is it something way more cynical, like a drug dealer mentality? A pretty heavy question to think about.